Hey, everybody, this is Jennifer Strickland, your host of the I Am a Woman podcast, and I am so excited to have an incredible guest with me for the next few episodes. We are going to camp out with Mona Corwin. She is an author, a speaker, the founder of the MomsLikeUs Academy. You are a mother of 5,
correct,
grandmother of 2,
yeah,
and you want more.
Yeah.
Right.
And I have a man.
And you have, well, good. Well, that's good. Mona is really special to me. I actually met her through my mentor, Debbie Titus. Yeah. It was way back when, and we're going to be talking about the feminist movement. And the feminist movement had a women's march in 2017. And Debbie Titus called a
emergency meeting.
That's right. She called an emergency meeting of women, really leaders, Christian women leaders in our area, to have a round table to talk about what would be really the Christian response to this movement. And so I was telling you, Mona, before we started, I've been taking, if you guys have been with us since the beginning, we've been talking about this word zakar, which is a biblical Hebrew word, and it means to remember. And when you remember, as the Bible defines it, you go back so that you could go forward. And that is why I've invited Mona to be on the podcast for the next few episodes, because she remembers the feminist movement.
I do.
She lived through it. You bought into it at some times.
Yep.
You've studied the history of it.
Yep.
And she's going to give us a little history lesson. What we're going to do basically is go back so that we can go forward. Because when I look at what is happening, I'm actually following the feminist movement on Instagram. I follow the Women's March on Instagram. It's very interesting to see what they're posting and what they're talking about. They're often posting pictures of the uterus and saying, this is ours and you can't have it and stuff like that.
Kind of. Unless you're a guy, you can have it.
But I've been watching this movement for a really long time because, like you, I speak to women. And I've been concerned about their messaging and whether it's really healthy for young women. And I want to go back to the roots of the movement so that we can walk forward, because most women right now, I don't know if you saw Megyn Kelly, her latest rant about the trans movement, and saying, wait a minute. I was starting out to support you and respect you, and now you just want to be in women's sports and you want to be in our bathrooms. And what is this really about? And yet that is a branch of feminism that is very confusing.
Well, they're not sticking up for those women in sports.
That's right. And it was.
So where are they? If they're for women, why are they only for trans men that say they're women, not for women? So we're going to get into that as we go.
We're going to get into that because
you do have to go back to go forward. So I think this is really wise. So hang in there with us. We got some really good answers.
We do. So we're going to go back. There's been, it's kind of contested how many waves there really were of feminism. 3, 4, 5, we don't know. But let's go back to the first wave.
Okay.
I want you and share with our listeners why this has been of interest to you before we go into our history lesson. Okay. What is it about this movement that has made you want to study it? I'm curious.
Well, the very first thing is that I was growing up just behind them. And so for me, it was like all the big girls were doing it. So I had to find out what that meant. And I had a very strict mother that wasn't going to let me do sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But I wanted boots for walking over men. And I wanted to be strong. And
sure.
So I wanted those things. But as I was going and watching, I was confused because I didn't understand their hatred for men, because I was young and I liked all the men. And I loved my dad and my grandpa and my aunt, my uncles. And I didn't see them as being awful. And I did not have a feminist mother. She was, we are all affected by feminism, and we're going to get into that. And we all have feminism kind of weaved into our thoughts. And so as I was going through it, I just got more angry at them. And it took me a while. In my book, The Unstoppable Generation, Are We the Ones We've Been Waiting For? And we are. I talk about, in the very front, about how I had to let go of my anger at the feminist movement for what they were doing. And what it has only progressed even more. My anger and bitterness has turned into curiosity, and I want to understand it so I can help women, Christian women specifically, understand how that works into God's perspective and God's design. There in it all, I ended up being a little bit of an authority on authentic womanhood, on biblical womanhood. And so I do teach that. But in the Moms Like Us Academy, it's really for moms to be good moms. Like there's no school for moms. So except for the Moms Like Us Academy. And we learn things there.
Yeah. I love that you do that.
Expert teachers and monthly stuff and Q&A, and we're always there for answers. And it's for those of you that know the Titus 2 scripture, Titus 2 is kind of like mentoring, like when you went to work in an insurance company, somebody would say, hey, find an older insurance guy and he's going to show you the ropes.
Sure.
Well, that's in the Bible.
Right.
Like the Bible's got everything, right?
The Bible's very clear about older women mentoring younger women.
That's Titus 2.
So when you saw the feminist movement growing up, you were looking at it like these were the big girls.
Oh, yeah.
So over the years, becoming a Christian and becoming a mentor, you have studied this movement. And I want to take some time to uncover what the lies are of the movement, what the truths are, what are the good things that were accomplished, because I think there were some good things. But let's go back to the first wave. Let's start there. Okay. What was the first? When was the first wave of feminism?
Okay, it was late 1800s, 1920. So by 1920, they had gotten the right to vote, and we all know that the first wave of feminism was indeed a right to vote.
Okay,
and so
which is a good thing.
It is.
Okay.
Well, let me just. Before we really even get into it, I want to make this clear up front.
Okay.
That the feminist movement did a really good job of pointing out problems that were in our culture and in society.
Okay.
The problem was, for me, and many women like me, was that I didn't like the way they answered the question to those problems.
Okay.
Or their methods. I might agree that abortion is wrong, but I don't want to blow up Planned Parenthood.
Sure.
So and why they wanted abortion, I don't agree with that at all. So Christian women were kind of left in this thing where, well, yeah, we want equal pay. I don't want my daughter mistreated in her job.
Right.
So they did a good job of pointing out those things. But how they went about it was not the way I agreed with. So it put me in this perspective where I was like, hey, I don't even know if I'm a feminist. I don't think I want to be hooked to that.
And a lot of women are feeling that way right now.
Yes, especially now they're feeling that way.
And I think that
as well they should.
As well they should. And I think as you go back and you look at the roots of the movement, it helps you understand what were their lives like? What were they after in the beginning?
Well, there's different strains, people will tell you. There's different streams of feminism. And I'll acknowledge that that's true. But where does that stream come from? What body of water does that come from?
Okay.
And it's when we go back and we start, we will find the bitter water.
Okay. So what was the issue that started the first wave?
They wanted a right to vote.
Okay.
Which we all know
Which we all know is good.
But they also wanted prohibition.
Okay. Why?
There was a lot of alcoholism, and they were upright women, and across the country, they literally wanted alcohol to be outlawed. So I don't know if you all are in favor of alcohol. You might not have liked that part of the feminist movement. So sometimes we only hear what Google wants us to know.
But the truth is they were not in favor of alcohol. Why? Were their husbands coming home drunk or what was the problem?
Drunk husbands are never a good thing.
Okay. So women were like,
we need to get together and fix this. But also the right to vote assumed that women had no rights. And that is not true. Women in the first wave, when they were single, they couldn't vote, but they could sign things. They could own land. But when they got married, they came underneath their husband's name. Okay. And so everything was under their husband. Some of that, when we look at the way the world was set up and has been set up for centuries, is that women are the most vulnerable of the creatures, in animals too. And so, and they, at that point, they were having lots of babies and lots of them were dying and lots of the babies were dying. And so women were vulnerable.
Sure.
And so they needed to be protected, and and they are protected by men. And so a woman at home with her children was considered, and they felt very cared for and taken care of. They just wanted to vote. Okay. And they wanted their husbands to not be drinking.
And they wanted their husbands to stop drinking
it's
so
really
much.
Pretty simple. Here's the key that you need to get out of this, the takeaway that you need to get out of this. We're laughing about the prohibition, but it actually was true. The lady that, two women, so if you want to look it up, Elizabeth Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. You've heard about her. We have a stamp.
Yeah. I mean,
have a coin.
Susan B. Anthony, isn't she like a major historical figure? Didn't she
feminism?
For women's rights. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So what Elizabeth Stanton was very intellectual. She was well educated. She had 7 kids and she was married. And she was the intellect behind the movement.
Okay.
And Susan B. went out and traveled around and kind of made things happen through the thing.
Okay. So at that point, they're getting women together because they want to vote.
Yep, they get the vote.
Now, where Margaret Sanger, she was also a part of this.
Yeah,
in the early roots, first wave.
Yeah, first wave.
Okay, so what was she about?
Okay, well, I need to tell you one more thing.
Okay.
The women, another thing is that these women were not mad at men. These women were not mad at men. They were angry at the situation they were in. Okay. And they wanted change. Please understand that if they wanted the right to vote, they were not voting. So when they got the right to vote, it was passed by men.
Okay, so men were supporting them.
Lots of men were supporting
So that vote to give women the right to vote was actually done by men because women couldn't vote.
That's exactly right.
Duh. Okay,
right.
And what about the property rights? Because was that a key thing? Because it sounds like they had property rights when they were single.
Yeah, like if their dad died, they would get their dad's stuff.
Okay, but when they got married, they did not.
Correct.
Okay, so they wanted that to be changed.
And that was changed. And again, pointing out problems is a good thing, and how you go about it is great. These people, this wave did not really, they made their voices heard, and they implemented change in a way that we would be happy with if it was going on today.
Okay.
The thing that is the problem for them to be able to go out and vote or go out and do the work, these women were they also wanted control of the population. They wanted control of how many babies they were having. They wanted it to be where they could it wasn't, you can't do birth control. There was any kind. But they didn't have birth control like we know it as the pill, but they were using natural. And, it was really looked down upon. And so they brought that up. And so to protect the women, so they weren't all dying off. Just think, they were like...
A lot of them were dying in childbirth.
Yes.
Babies were dying. So were they homemakers? Were they family?
Yes, they were homemakers.
Or were they like, I don't want to do this and I want out of this house and I don't want to have all these babies?
It was every stream of women what they wanted.
Okay.
But the majority of women before 1950, if you had school-aged children, you were inside the home, that was your job.
That was your job.
Before 1950. Absolutely.
Were they miserable?
No, it was revered. It was revered and elevated to be a homemaker and a wife. Women wanted to be it, and the ones that didn't get to were very sad. You know, we have the old Spencer kind of talk.
Right.
So it was very revered to be a wife and a mother.
More so than it is today.
Oh, my goodness.
Right.
It's despised now.
Right.
We'll get into that.
Yeah.
Very
Not
despised.
by everybody, but right.
But
okay,
anyway, so for these women to get to do that, something had to be done about the children. You're going to see a thread through this whole thing.
For them to be able to do what? What was
whatever
their objective?
They wanted.
Okay, so that was the thing.
If they wanted to work in Congress, if they wanted to, women were doing things.
They were working.
Yes.
Already.
Yes,
but they wanted.
And they were educated.
Okay, but these women wanted more. They wanted more freedom.
Some of them. Yeah.
And what? The children were a problem?
Yeah. Like who's going to take care of them?
Right.
No daycare.
And so is that where Margaret Sanger came in?
Margaret Sanger fixed the problem. And she came in and she helped start Planned Parenthood that far back. The deep, dark secret that they don't want to talk about with Margaret Sanger is that she was actually into eugenics.
Okay, what's eugenics?
Eugenics is what you do when you want to get rid of undesirables in the culture. And
like Hitler.
Yeah.
Okay, so eugenics is cleansing the culture from undesirable people?
Yes. Very racist. Very, very, very racist.
Okay.
Very
and so
racist.
Margaret Sanger was one of the first feminists.
Yeah. She spoke to the Ku Klux Klan women. She we have videos of her. If you need them, we can get them. Some of them you can get on the internet, but some of them have been bleached from the internet. But she was absolutely, I can give you one of her quotes, which I think probably is a good time to do that. She basically said that it was that we needed to cleanse. And it wasn't just the races that she was trying to change. She was trying to get rid of undesirables like Down syndrome and people with epilepsy and things like that. She was trying to create a clean race.
Is it true that they had an agenda in putting the Planned Parenthood facilities in low-income Black neighborhoods?
I'm so glad you brought that up because, yes, they absolutely did. That was the plan. And
because since abortion was legal, half of the Black population through Planned Parenthood has been eliminated.
Correct. And right now there are more babies in New York City that are Black that are being aborted than are born.
So now it's more than half.
Mm-hmm. That are aborted.
And that was Margaret Sanger. Okay. Anything else?
And she put them in Black communities and she called it the Negro Project.
Wow.
Yeah. So we want to love like the first wave and right to vote and everything. But Margaret Sanger came in there with, you know, she was a racist. And right now, Planned Parenthood has been trying to kind of step back from it because it's kind of coming out a bit.
Sure.
And so they're trying to distance and then they're trying to reword things because that's what progressives do. They progressively move forward. And when they hit a stumbling block or a roadblock or speed bump, they will back up and they will redefine or rephrase whatever it is. And that's kind of what we're experiencing now since we've been talking about the womanhood.
Okay. So were these Planned Parenthoods originally performing abortions? Because abortion didn't become legal until 1972. Were they offering birth control?
Yeah, they were helping them with birth control.
Okay, so they were helping women with birth control so that the women could go and do whatever they wanted, basically.
But there was, as we all know, abortion's been around for...
even before then.
Yeah, forever.
Sure.
And they would help them find, quote, cleaner places for that kind of thing.
Okay. So
they didn't have
that was an important part of it.
Like that.
Okay.
So it's said that she helped stop back alley abortions with coat hangers. Like that was a phrase that was continually used. You don't hear it much anymore because it is pretty graphic, But yeah, that was very, very common in the 60s to hear that kind of talk.
Okay. So they achieved the right to vote.
They did.
Okay. Men, they were united with men in that. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, men were on board.
Second wave. What happens then? So in the beginning, this is looking, I don't know, this isn't looking so bad, except that, you know, I'm not pro-abortion. So I'm not obviously not KKK. And the eugenics aspect of it is an ugly root to the movement that we really do need to be aware of. Okay. But what happened in the second wave?
Well, from the first wave to the second wave, there was a little lull. Just a little intermission kind of taking place. It's called World War II.
Okay.
And the men went off to war.
Okay.
And the women were in the factories working everything. So they were working.
Sure.
And, you know, not many of them were getting pregnant because there were no men.
There were no men. The men were not there.
The men were gone.
And they had access to birth control now.
Mostly still just natural.
Still natural. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The pill wasn't here yet.
Okay. So what were their lives like in the second wave?
Okay. Well, of course, they were working really hard during the war. And then the men came home from war and we had the golden era of our country.
The baby boomers were
boomers. That was the
everybody
50s.
Got pregnant.
Everybody got pregnant. So housing went through the roof.
Okay.
Because, man, my husband, he's a civil engineer. He would have loved it back then. But they had all of their babies and that suburbia came up. We had to have station wagons. They started the factories where they were making tanks and stuff, started making great things like washing machines.
So washing machines.
Yes. A real washing machine.
That's huge.
Stove, refrigerators.
Okay.
Like this was huge. And at the same time, TV came.
Okay.
And so they had to sell this stuff. So on all the commercials and everything, you would see this beautiful person with her kids and her apron and her pearls. Yes. Going through, using her vacuum, talking about all of that. So life was good for.
Yeah, they had vacuums now. They had washing machines.
They had a Sears catalog. Hello.
They had a Sears catalog. Okay, so what started the second wave? What was it? What was the problem? Because that's what you got to have a problem for women to rise up.
Yeah. Well, there was a movement and then they found a problem.
Okay.
Okay.
What was the problem?
So it wasn't the women in America got all mad. There was a movement and it found the problem. So the movement was the feminist movement. And the feminist movement is based in changing things. Betty Friedan wrote a book called The Feminine Mystique.
Okay.
It's all about how women have it terrible. And the men are putting us down. And the men are the problem. And aren't you not happy? And reading this book, which of course I've read many times. I've read all the feminist books I can get my hands on. Even Gloria Steinem's new one. I'm like, oh my gosh, girl.
It hasn't changed, probably. They're still,
no.
You're still miserable if you're at home taking care of.
Oh, you're despised. Right. It is not. You can do anything you want in our culture as a woman.
Right.
But do not think that you can be a wife and a mother and be
content.
Well, to have any brains, friend. Like, you don't qualify to have an opinion.
That's so interesting.
Well,
that's so interesting. I mean, it's
been that way with them all along.
So, because it's the greatest thing in the world to be a mother.
No, it's God's plan for you to be a mother.
That too.
Makes it the goodest plan. Because God's always got the goodest plan.
He's always got the goodest plan.
He's got the goodest
So that's his goodest plan for all of us. But Betty Friedan writes this book, The Feminine Mystique, and basically starts to sow this dissatisfaction in the women about marriage and about motherhood.
Yeah. I want to read a couple of her... Betty and there's two other women that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem, and then Kate Millett.
Okay,
a lot of you may not know about Kate, but you're going to get to know her. Now, Gloria Steinem was really famous for a phrase that said, "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle." Now, isn't that cute? You just can laugh and think, oh, it's pretty harmless, right? Well, just listening, keep listening. Because you can find that one all over the place on the internet. But Kate Millett said, monogamy and prostitution go together.
Monogamy and prostitution go together. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
Well, they said that if you were a woman and you had a husband, that's basically is legalized rape. They use these words.
Okay.
So
so basically they start telling the women you're being taken advantage of.
Yeah, sounds like Eve.
Okay, and the fish and the bicycle one is so interesting. Like, I need a man like I need a warm blanket on a cold day.
Mm-hmm. But well, actually, we do need men.
Yeah, I do. I need him. I need my husband like I need a warm blanket on a cold day. I need him like that. Yeah. But they're saying you need a man like a fish needs a bicycle. Like, in other words, you don't need a man. Right. Okay, so that was the beginning of that movement.
Yes, and they also, it was based in communism. And I'm going to give you Lenin's a quote from Lenin. It said, "The chief thing is to get women to take part in a socially productive labor, to liberate them from domestic slavery, to free them from the stupefying and the humiliating subjugation to the eternal drudgery of the kitchen and the nursery. This struggle will be a long one, and it demands a radical reconstruction, both of social technique and morale. But in the end, it will completely triumph in communism."
Really?
Thank you.
The drudgery of the kitchen, that's my favorite place.
Well, I mean, but it was a long, right. It was this really long thing, like so many stuff that they said.
Okay.
Another feminist said, "The nuclear family must be destroyed, whatever its ultimate meaning. The breakup of the family now is an objectively revolutionary process."
Wow. Okay.
Gloria Steinem said, "Housewives are dependent creatures who are still children. They're parasites." This is Simone Dubois. She wrote The Second Sex in 1969. She's a real prominent part of the feminist movement, but we don't have time to go into all of them because there was like a bunch of them. Really, there was.
Sure.
Yeah. She said, "A parasite sucking out the living strength of another organism. The housewife's labor does not even tend towards the creation of anything durable. Women's work within the home is not directly useful to society, and it produces nothing. The housewife is subordinate, secondary, parasitical. It is for the common welfare that the situation must alter, prohibiting marriage as a career for women." A sociologist and a very prominent...
I'm like in shock.
Well, yeah. "The housewife is a nobody, and housework is a dead-end job. It may actually be the deteriorating effect on her mind, rendering her incapable of prolonged concentration on any single task. She comes to seem dumb as well as dull. Being a housewife makes women sick." Sociologist Jessie Bernard in 1982. Like, yeah.
Well, that's why it's so interesting because, we have both had a great relationship with Debbie Titus. And she also lived. We talked about this many times. She lived through this season. And
she was one of the cool girls that I would have been watching.
Okay. Well, she's
cool girl.
She made the home her whole ministry, the message of the home.
And she fought through all of this junk.
She sure did. Look at what she was up against. Oh my goodness, that's insane.
Okay, I got one more.
Okay, go.
The Paul King is an expert on this is not we're not doing a political thing, but you need to know the roots of feminism. Paul King is an expert on communism, and he writes in his book Takedown that Kate Millett channeled all her revolutionary nostrils in a campaign to take down traditional marriage and family. The three people most responsible for the disassembling of the Western society as that we see it today is Karl Marx, Hubert Mescow, and Kate Millett.
Wow. Okay. So Wow. Okay. So this is what's happening is basically the family, and we're going to wrap up this first episode. We're going to wrap this up because we're going to follow up the next episode talking about the third wave, and we'll pick up where we left off. Let's just stop here for just a second. What happened, Mona? How do these women go from being proud to be mothers, housewives? I get the property stuff. I get the right to vote. I get that. Mm-hmm. I really do. And I respect it. Yeah. How did they get to the point where women were so angry and dissatisfied and looking at being a mother like you're a leech? I mean, or whatever. Parasite, sorry.
Worse.
The man's the leech. The woman's the parasite. So we won't. Yeah, that was a little bit not planned. But how did we get there?
We got there because this is my opinion. Women had so much time left around their homes. They no longer had to take care of their homes like they did before the war. Or
because they had washing machines and vacuum cleaners.
Yeah, they had things that really made them have extra time. They really did have extra time.
They had extra time.
And instead of taking it and using it for good, they were like the Israelites in the wilderness that came out of Egypt, and they were given food every day. Mm-hmm. And they're like, we don't like this manna and this other stuff you're dropping. Yeah, we want quail. We want meat. We want this. We want the onions. We want, and they were fussy and they were cranky and they were very vulnerable to the feminist movement. And in the early 60s, a girl named Katie Sarah Child, I think that's her name. But she discovered a political method for winning people over. And that was their answer. And that's how it happened. It was called consciousness raising.
Okay. Before we close out this episode, there's a lot of consciousness raising going on right now in our culture.
It is the method.
Okay. It is the method.
Always has been.
Okay. So, because you can take satisfied, grateful homemakers and turn them into angry, bitter feminists or angry, bitter women, which is what really matters, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, through consciousness raising.
You can.
And right now, there's consciousness raising going on in the schools. And I know we're going to get into this a lot deeper in our later episodes. But before we close today, can you please tell my listeners, how does consciousness raising work? Is it the same as thought reform and mind control?
No, I don't
think
so.
It's not. Okay. Okay, because I like to teach on mind control because it's something I get.
I think it can fall underneath those categories because you're actually trying to get people to think a different way.
Okay, but it's different. It's different than mind control. Okay.
They convince them.
Okay, so what is consciousness raising and how does it work? And then we're going to close out.
They kind of use their emotions, but they use their mind too. Okay, so consciousness raising is a radical weapon. It is a radical weapon. And it is used by, it can be used by anybody. But it was actually used by Mao in his conquering of his run to conquer the world. And what did Mao kill? 60 million people? No, that's the babies. Millions. I mean, actually, I think it's 1 billion. Okay, you can look that up. That will show. But Mao was one of the biggest tyrants in history and killed so many people. Him and Stalin killed people like crazy. Okay. Communist.
Okay. And they did that through consciousness raising.
They start with consciousness raising.
Okay.
So
what
consciousness
is that?
Raising. What Mao would do, he would go into a village of an area that he wanted to take, and he would gather up the women, and not him himself, but he would send his people, and then start asking them, look, how's it going? How are you happy? Like, how is it in this village? Well, how are you being treated? And invariably in there, the women, there would be some women that they weren't being treated very well. And then she would say, well, my husband is coming home drunk. He's mad. He's beating me. He's this. I don't want to have sex. He makes me have sex. Like, so the other women, even though they may not have had any of those things in their lives, they would be saying, oh, what the heck? That's terrible. We got to do something. So it plays on the empathy in a woman's heart and the emotions of a woman's heart. So it takes something that God meant for good, and it was turning it into something called bitterness breeds bitterness. It breeds bitterness, and pain invokes pain. And that was what Mao says. That's how he describes consciousness raising. And when Katie found this, she's like, this is it. This is how we're going to get it out. Because they didn't have the internet. They had TV.
Sure,
but what are they going to do?
No internet. This huge movement.
So in 1968, there were 200 women at the first NOW convention.
Okay.
200. And Betty and Gloria and Kate Millett and some of the other players,
the babes.
They got off alone. They didn't like what they were talking about. They didn't feel like it was radical enough. And they wanted to bring this in. And Sarah's like, I got it. This is it. We're going to start consciousness raising groups where women can find their voice.
Sure.
Because women aren't happy. And that's what they had been saying. Women are not happy. Women aren't happy. It's like, yeah, I'm not happy either. Like, but the realm of what happiness is so wide that any woman can say, I'm not happy.
Anyone can find something. Right.
Any woman can say, well, I don't feel very pretty. Well,
right, sure.
When you're out in the yard, when you're dressed up, like what? When you're young, like there's just all kinds of varieties of that. And so they could get those women to talk to one another. And invariably there would be someone that truly was hurt. Again, a problem was actually there. And then they would rally around those women. Like when you talked about the mutilation, the female mutilation.
I want to talk about that.
Yeah, well, that was probably a group of women that felt that way, that actually did something.
Right.
That were part of the feminist movement that they could have been Christian women that went to church every week and that loved the Lord, and they called themselves feminists, but they didn't know what the feminist movement really was.
What the roots were.
But that was never a goal of the feminist movement. They would say they had 3 things that they found important. And so we all can get on board with what they said they found important. But there was this underlying belly, and it was ugly.
Okay. So really quickly.
Wait a minute. I forgot to tell you. 200 women.
Oh, right.
200 women. In 2 years, 20,000 walked the streets for the first Women's March in New York City. So in 2 years, no internet.
That's incredible. They went from 200 women to 20,000 women the next year.
No, 2 years.
In 2 years, by basically sowing discord among the women, of tapping in through empathy of the things that they were unhappy about and that they wanted to find change.
And they came, and the mouthpieces, the ones out front, said, we know that the problem with no name, as it kind of went, as they went along, the problem with no name, it actually has a name. It's called patriarchy.
Okay.
And because it was patriarchy, then it has to be men. So men are the problem. So then these women are hanging out with their friends with lots of time.
So children are the problem.
Children are the problem.
Men are the problem. Anything else? No. Okay, we're just going to start there. The nuclear family is going to end up.
They can't find themselves. So
being a mother, being a woman at home is a problem. Okay, so we're going to wrap up this episode. consciousness raising,
crazy, right?
Patriarchy. And I want to talk about on the next episode, I want to talk about the female genital mutilation. That is very important to me. It's something I've studied, and I want to understand, how could it possibly be that they raised their voices to protect girls from female genital mutilation, and today they are promoting it. Today they are promoting it. So I want to understand how that happened. And my guess is consciousness raising. That's my best guess. But
kids are the problem.
Yeah.
And we fix everything through consciousness raising.
I'm really interested about that. Okay. So I'm excited to keep having our conversation.
Good,
next time we're going to talk about the third wave, and we're going to get to where we are now. Thank you so much, Mona, for joining me.
I might have a couple little more minute on the
second wave. We'll pick up at the end of the second wave.
We need to.
Okay. Sounds good. All right.
There were some stuff that we kind of need to know about.
Okay, sounds good. So we're going to meet up again next week. But thank you guys for joining us in the I Am a Woman podcast. We're going to go back and understand the roots of this movement so that we can go forward with a new understanding. I am a woman, and my name means life.